few months ago, I decided to restart my dream game again for the 4th time. Now, normally this wouldn't be a huge problem, but I would like to at some point release a commercial project so I could start getting some money from this passion that we all call game dev. And if that wasn't pressure enough, I would also like to present a demo at the East Coast Game Conference, which will be held in April of 2024. That leaves me only about 6 months to try and get a prototype off the ground. And to make matters even worse, I decided to up the pressure by swapping from Unity to Unreal. Yet, despite all of this pressure and all the odds being pinned against me, I actually feel really confident in being able to do this before those 6 months are up. But before we get too far into that, I did want to go ahead and tell you about the game, Steps of Divynia. It's a 2D Metroidvania where players will control Alyidia, who is a girl that believes in magic, which a lot of people consider to be fake or non-existent. Yet, as Alyidia, you will need to fight tainted beasts, search ancient ruins, and uncover magic as parts of her home transform from the mundane into the unknown. To help you with that, you will have a mystical fox named Alkuru, who is very knowledgeable about the world and the magic that lies within it. It is thanks to Alkuru that Alyidia will be able to perform extraordinary feats that would be considered impossible for most humans, like wall jumping. Alkuru will also help the player with dry tasks and marking where certain things are located on the map that Alyidia has already uncovered, or any obvious path the player has not yet taken. And as you can probably already guess, the game is inspired by Hollow Knight for the combat and the vast exploration. But more than that, the game is also inspired by games such as Monster Hunter, Dragon Age, and Ender Lilies. Finally, games like Dust and Elysian Tale inspire this game as well. Yet, the Steps of Divynia was not always like this. In fact, it started out as a simple stealth platformer when I was taking a game design class in school. The core design behind that game was going to be a collectathon where you would have to gather certain items in order to progress through the levels, meanwhile trying to avoid any townsfolk who might try and stop Alyidia on her way. I quickly scrapped this, however, as I couldn't really fit a good story within the context of what was happening in the game. For example, why would certain town members or guards try and stop Alyidia and keep her from reaching her goal when she in fact is a resident member of that town? Now, I should mention the fact that the reason that the game started out like this was because it was only going to have 2 levels. It was supposed to be something super simple because it was just for a class project that was only going to take about 8 weeks. Yet, when midterms came around, I found myself playing Hollow Knight, and while the game is very impressive and I enjoy it deeply, I was more impressed by Team Cherry and their story of how they came about to make Hollow Knight, which started with just the 2 of them. And thus, I come to my first main realization of things usually start out very simplistic, but can turn quite complex, if that's not what we're wanting, could lead us toward a lot of trouble. Yet, it also gives me a sense of relief, because that also means that big games such as Hollow Knight come from something that started simplistic. I mean, they started from a game jam game that, at least from what I could tell, didn't do so well at the time. Yet they were able to take pieces from it and mold it into something that would become extraordinary, stick with people for years to come. And what perhaps even enamored me even more is that neither one of them really knew how to code, and they ended up using assets that they bought from the Unity asset store. Thus, I remembered why I got into game dev, which was to do something that a lot of people consider to be impossible. And thus, the theme for the game was also born, as I realized I wanted that feeling of impossible to be the main theme for the game, because I would like to recreate a feeling similar to Hollow Knight, not recreate Hollow Knight itself. That would be unfair and would never live up to the expectation of what Hollow Knight sets forward. Instead, I want to create that feeling of exploration and always wondering what's around the next corner. The tight action that comes from the combat that appears super simple, but really has a lot of depth to it that requires a lot of time and skill in order to get good at. And at the end of the day, if whatever I created ended up not being super popular or being a hit at all, well, at least I know in my heart that I would have tried and that the attempt was made. Thus, I would encourage other game devs to aim big, but also to remember to keep your feet on the ground and set realistic expectations for what's before you. And the reason I say this is because I was watching a video the other day from a GDC talk that talks about aiming big and having an extremely grand vision for your game and your studio, because it takes something big in order to really impress, wow people, and change the gaming industry. Thus, it's better to aim high, swing, and miss than it is to try and swing low, knowing that you'll never make much of an impact at all. Or at least that's the way I see it. That's my opinion toward the matter. Yet, at least in my case, the big problem was I didn't have any art skills or programming skills at the time. Therefore, I was really scrambling to just try and get simple things to work in Unity. And at first, I was really stubborn. I thought, well, I would just learn every aspect of game development myself. That way, I don't have to, worry about hiring out for anything. Yet about 6 months in, I started realizing it was going to take a very long time for me to do both the art and the programming. Therefore, I decided to cut back on expenses and hire an artist instead. And of course, things would get better over time, at least until Unity decided to update their terms of service and start introducing a runtime fee. And that's not the main reason that I just decided to switch to Unreal Engine, but it was the catalyst. I had always planned on using Unreal when it came to 3D games. I was just too worried to use it to make a 2D game. However, I was starting to gain a lot of confidence in my own ability because of the fact that I had just almost finished Annie's Cross and was doing decently well on YouTube. Therefore, I decided, let's go ahead and try Unreal for 2D, and I'm so glad that I did. By the way, are you a struggling game developer just trying to make your own way? Perhaps you might want to join a community of developers that understand that struggle that you're going through. If that sounds like you, then consider joining the Discord, linked in the description below, where you can talk to me and other developers as we all work on our journey together. As you can see, in just about 6 weeks, I was able to get most of the basic character movement down. The character so far feels really nice to control, and while I don't think I'm quite there yet, I'm close to what I can see the end vision being for her movement, which includes the jumping and the wall sliding as well. Furthermore, I've actually started getting combat implemented, and while the animations are really janky at the moment, and I definitely don't like them, in fact, I don't really like any of the animations so far, I do think it's a wonderful start, and the fact that the pushback has been implemented when the character attacks feels extremely nice and smooth. Dare I say it, I've actually had fun just picking on this poor turtle here while trying to figure out what the pushback could be for, the different angles when the player attacks. Furthermore, and perhaps what I consider to be most impressive, is what the level looks like at this stage. No, it's not done, and there are things that could definitely be improved, but it's looking extremely beautiful. And I just love the mysterious vibe that comes from both the color, the fog, and some of the little particle fireflies that are moving around. At first, I thought this was going to be what gave me the biggest issues, mostly because I do think Unity handles the sorting of sprites much better. Unreal does a good enough job to where I can still stay organized by having multiple folders that have the Y depth for the sprites, as well as what translucency order they should be drawn in on the screen. And perhaps the biggest thing that I've enjoyed from Unreal that Unity didn't have is having the ability to connect code with blueprints. That synergy is amazing because there's been times when I just don't know how to do something in C++, but Blueprints has me covered. And then I can just connect the two together so that everything works in harmony. The best example I have of this is my weapon class, which has the C++ implement the spawning, the location, the rotation of the actual collider and the visual effects that appear on screen, while the blueprint itself checks for any overlapped actors and then also checks to see if they inherit from eye damageable interface. And then if they do, it calls a C++ function which starts handling the damage to deal to anything that isn't the owner of the weapon itself. Yet none of this would have been possible if it wasn't for what came before it. And that's what I love about game development. Your skills slowly develop. So even if you are currently feeling like you are stuck in the mud and you've been at it for maybe 6 months or so and you're not really seeing any headway, I encourage you to stick with it, because eventually the mud starts to get thinner and you start to randomly make your way towards solid ground. And before you even realize it, your skills are going to be something that you can be impressed with, and then you're just going to take off running. Thus, even if you have to slow down, just keep going and don't give up on the things that you love in life. I promise you, it will get easier. You just hang in there a little bit longer. And yes, it may take only a month. It may also still take a year, but it will eventually happen, you believe. And if you still feel like you're stuck or need a little bit of extra motivation to get going, then perhaps you should check out this video where I go over some productivity tips to help you on your game dev journey. But as for me in this video, that's going to be all. Until next time, stay awesome, keep creating, and remember to spark the imagination. Take care, friends. Goodbye.